The Battle of Verdun is considered the greatest and lengthiest battle in world history. Never before or since has there been such a lengthy battle involving so many men situated on such a tiny piece of land. The battle, which lasted from February 21st, 1916 until December 19th, 1916, caused over an estimated 700,000 dead, wounded, and missing. Verdun is a small town with a large cathedral that was turned into a military base. Verdun is only 10 square miles, which is small for a battlefield during World War I. The outbreak of World War I caused Germany to fight on two fronts: France, England, and Belgium in the west, and Russia in the east. General Erich von Falkenhayn was the German commander-in-chief. He viewed England as Germany's most powerful rival, but would be weak as soon as France was defeated. Falkenhayn's plan to defeat the French was called Alblussen. This plan was to attack a nationally sought-after place so France could deploy as many troops as they could in one battle to defend it. This would cause mass casualties to the French in only one battle. Falkenhayn chose Verdun because it had been the past site for French military victories and was a national monument to the French people. The French military in Verdun was unprepared for a German assault. They knew Germany was preparing for a battle, but not at Verdun. There were French troops stationed there with over 400 artillery guns, but no match to the looming German assault. Germany collected 1,300 artillery guns and over 2.5 million rounds and more than 350,000 men. The German assault was scheduled to start on the night of February the 12th, but was postponed due to poor weather conditions and low visibility. The attack began on February 21st, 1916. The Germans bombarded the town and surrounding fortress with artillery guns. Verdun was bombed so badly that they were forced to evacuate the civilian population. There was nothing as tiring as the continuous, enormous bombardment as we have lived through last night at the front. The night is disturbed by a light as clear as if it were day, the earth moves and shakes like jelly, and the men who are still at the front line cannot hear anything but drum fire and moaning of the wounded friends and screams of hurt horses, the wild pounding of their own hearts, hour after hour, day after day, night after night. Unknown. French reinforcements take 8 hours to move 3 kilometers due to heavy bombardment and gunfire from the Germans. They retreat 4 times before they reach the front line and are forced to take heavy casualties in the reinforcement of the current troops. After 24 hours of continuous bombing, the buildings are left in shambles. In the morning of February 22nd, the Germans continue heavy bombing of Verdun and the surrounding fortresses. The Germans focused their attack on the villages of Hamon and Bois de Cator by sending their 7th German Army and their 18th German Army. This forces the French to retreat to the village of Beaumont. During the artillery fire, phone lines were destroyed, disabling the Frenchmen on the front lines to communicate with their superiors. By the end of the day, Hamon and Bois de Cator were completely in German control. On the 4th day of the battle, the Germans have destroyed the first line of French defenses and are moving towards Fort Dumas inch by inch. The Germans deploy more troops, which allows them to take Côte 344, Bois des Fosses, Bois de Chaumy, and Ornez. This means the Germans have taken the second line of defense, including the first. French reinforcements arrived this day under the control of General Beaufournier and have partially halted the German advance. On February 25th, the Germans advance on Fort Douaumont. It only takes 50 men because the fort has been deserted by the French and the guns have been moved to other places.
Douaumont is ours!
I have returned from the most terrible ordeal I have ever witnessed. 4 days and 4 nights, 96 hours, the last 2 days in ice-cold mud, kept under fire without any protection from this narrow. I have arrived with 175 men. I returned with 34, of whom several have turned insane. A French captain's field report. A representative of Commander-in-Chief Joffre, named General de Castillo, is sent to Verdun to assess the state of the city and the troops there. De Castillo decides that the current general, named Hare, is doing a poor job. De Castillo appoints General Philippe Pétain as the new general in Verdun. Pétain deploys new troops and creates lines of defense between Verdun and the German-occupied fortresses. This makes it possible for France to supply Verdun with more artillery, which holds the German advances. Pétain ordered that the Germans must be held where they were for 3 days. The Germans advanced to Harmont, but were halted by French artillery on top of a nearby hill. On February 27th, there was a snowstorm, so artillery fire is decreased to a minimum that day. The next day, fighting continues as the Germans attempt to advance on Fort Vaux. They are ambushed by 2 machine gun nests planted on an overlooking hill. A German experience The soldiers fell over like tin soldiers. Almost all of our officers got hurt or killed, and many of our men got killed because of their own artillery fire, which is too close and therefore causes many victims. Unknown German soldier. On February 29th, German pioneers used flamethrowers to destroy French trenches. Many French soldiers surrendered after witnessing the demoralizing effect that flamethrowers had on people. After 3 days, Germans had not advanced, and Pétain's mission was complete. On March 6, the Germans began their attack on Côte 304 and Le Morne. With heavy artillery fire, the Germans advance and take over the villages Forges and Renningenville. The next day, the Germans begin their march on Bois de Corbeau, which is a major lookout point for the French military. On March 8th, the French launch a counterattack, which pushes the Germans back, and the French regain their territory. On March 10th, the Germans captured Bois de Corbeau, but with great losses. This battle lasts 4 days, and with every attack followed by a counterattack. The end of this fight totals 89,000 French dead or wounded and 82,000 Germans dead or wounded. On March 14th, a massive German assault is launched on Port-la-Homme. The Germans focus their fire on Côte 304, which is where the French military is firing from. The Germans' main attack is launched from the west from a nearby village of Evercourt. The Germans attack the French 29th Division and destroy them completely. It is believed that French defectors had given away French position to the Germans, and that caused over 3,000 men to be caught by surprise and taken prisoners of war. Life in the trenches was hard. There was little food or water. One German soldier describes his experience. One soldier was going insane with thirst and drank from a pond covered with a greenish layer near Le Morne. A corpse was afloat in it, his black countenance face down in the water, and his abdomen swollen as if he had been filling himself up with water for days now. The Germans' plan to attack only Côte 304 did not work. They started to attack both Côte 304 and Morne-la-Homme simultaneously. The French do not have any reserve troops, and the Germans are gaining ground quickly, but with great loss. The Germans make it to the lower crest of Morne-la-Homme, but cannot make it all the way up the hill without sustaining many casualties. On May 3rd, the Germans start heavy bombardment that lasts for 3 days. With no food or water, the French soldiers are barely ready for battle. The French lose an estimated 10,000 men after 3 days, and the Germans finally capture Le Morne. We all carried the smell of dead bodies with us. The bread we ate, the stagnant water we drank, everything we touched smelled of decomposition, due to the fact that the earth surrounding us was packed with dead bodies. A German infantryman. The French take back Fort Douaumont. Commander-in-Chief Joffre blames Pétain for being too careful and too defensive. Pétain is moved to a different battle division and was replaced by General Robert Nivelle and his right-hand man, Charles Magnan. On May 16th, the French began heavy gunfire on Fort Douaumont. On May 22nd, 2 regiments, led by Magnan, attacked the fort. The French artillery cuts off German reinforcements from entering the fort, and the Germans cut off French reinforcements from entering their fields. The Germans defend the fort and obliterate the French offensive. Out of 200 men, only 20 men returned to Verdun. June 1st, 1916, the Germans used flamethrowers to eliminate the French in the trenches behind Fort Vaux. One of the trenches is so filled with wounded and dead bodies, the attackers have to use the parapet in order to be able to move forward. French officer. Germany launches an offensive on the village of Fleury and the conquering of Fort Somerville. This is the Germans' last stop before they are able to conquer Verdun. On June 21st, the Germans fire warning shots to alert the French that they would be attacking. 2 days later, the Germans unleash a new poisonous gas called phosphine gas. It is expected that the French gas masks will not be able to handle it. At 10 p.m., the Germans shoot 110,000 gas grenades into the French lines. The French front lines are barely affected, and the attack on Fort Somerville is a failure. Life in the trenches during the summer was even worse than it was during the winter. During the summer months, the swarms of flies around the corpses and the stench, that horrible stench. If we had to construct trenches, we had to put garlic cloves in our nostrils. A French soldier. On July 12th, the Germans launched another advance on Fort Somerville. It was initiated by poison gas. The gas had little effect. French fire subdues the German advance, which confuses the German assault. One German commander refuses to continue. While Fort Somerville is being attacked, the Germans finally capture Fleury and are waiting for reserve troops from Fort Dumont. The German reinforcements do not come. The French receive reinforcements and begin to bombard Fleury, which forces the Germans into hiding. Again, the German attack has failed. On August 1st, the Germans charge their assault on Fleury. The battle is back and forth. They take turns sacking each other. This went on for weeks. Fires lay all over the battlefield. Finally, the French launch one more massive counterattack and take back Fleury on September 6th. You could never get rid of the horrible stench. If we were on leave and we were having a drink somewhere, it would only last a minute before the people at the table beside us would stand up and leave. It was impossible to endure the horrible stench of Verdun. A German soldier. On August 27th, the German general Falkenhayn is transferred to Romania. In his place comes General Ludendorff and General von Hindenburg. On October 21st, the French starts a bombardment of both Fort Vaux and Fort Douaumont. The next day, extreme damage is done to Fort Douaumont. An enormous explosion creates panic in German troops, and the German commander is forced to evacuate. Fort Vaux is highly damaged, but machine gun fire is keeping the French at bay. The French advance from a new angle, which is hidden from gunfire. The Germans suffer heavy losses, and General Ludendorff has no choice but to withdraw his troops from Fort Vaux. Everyone who searches for cover in a shell hole stumbles across the slippery, decomposing bodies and has to proceed with smelly hands and smelly clothes. A French soldier. After the French victory at Fort Vaux, it remained silent on the battlefield for several weeks. On Monday, December 11th, the French start shelling the German lines, and they are forced to retreat to their original starting position outside the limits of Verdun. Finally, after 10 months of fighting, the German command decides that Verdun was a failure and they had been defeated. The battle ended on Tuesday, December 19th, 1916. French casualties totaled to 337,231, and German casualties totaled to 337,000. The Germans were defeated because they would never reach the city of Verdun and were pushed back to their original positions.